Well, she's not bad looking. She's not a beauty, but she's not ugly either.
When I first went to greet my boyfriend Kevin's parents, his mother, Susan, gave me a long, rude look and then immediately started criticizing my appearance. We hadn't even gotten through the greetings yet. It was the first time I had met Kevin's parents. My name is Emma. Even though we've only been dating for 6 months, my boyfriend Kevin is 33, 2 years older than me. I'm 31, so we're both of marriageable age. I naturally started thinking about marriage with Kevin, and by the 3rd month of our relationship, I introduced him to my mom. However, I still hadn't met his family yet. It made me nervous, and I began to worry that maybe he wasn't serious about me. Kevin graduated from a prestigious university and is an elite at the company and seems to be on a fast career path. On the other hand, I'm just an ordinary office worker. It was Kevin who confessed to me. He had come to my company for a meeting, saw me by chance, and said it was love at first sight. He gave me his business card, and after some relentless courting, we started dating. Once we started going out, I found Kevin to be kind and considerate. But he's not a weak, overly sensitive guy. He's sporty and cool. He's got lots of friends and is pretty popular. Why hadn't such an amazing guy ever dated anyone before? It wouldn't have been surprising if he'd already married a beautiful woman by now. When I asked him about it, the answer seemed to lie with his overbearing mother, Susan, who adored him to a fault. Apparently, she had tormented all of his previous girlfriends.
My mom's just crazy, you know?
Kevin would say, trying to avoid introducing me to her.
I love you, Emma, and I want to marry you soon. But she's going to flip. She might even say nasty things to you just to ruin it.
Is she really that bad? I mean, calling your mom crazy sounds harsh. I gently pointed out, but Kevin shook his head.
It's not about me. She has to be the center of everything. She thinks her opinion is always right, and everyone else should just go along with it. I've given up trying to deal with her. She's like a different species.
I couldn't believe how much Kevin seemed to dislike his mom.
Doesn't your dad ever say anything to her?
I come from a single-parent household. My dad passed away from illness when I was young, so I don't really know what it's like to have a father around. But it seems strange to me that Kevin's dad would just let someone that unbearable be. Kevin sighed.
My dad gave up a long time ago. When they first got married, she was normal, but over time she became more and more self-centered. Now, as long as she doesn't interfere with his work, he's fine with it.
I see. Even though I answered, I still couldn't fully believe it. My mom was nothing like that, so I couldn't imagine such a toxic parent existing outside of TV series. But as soon as I met Susan, I realized Kevin wasn't exaggerating when he said, "She's just crazy." I was stunned into silence by Susan's sudden insults. I didn't know what to say.
Mom, that's rude.
Stop it.
Kevin's dad, Paul, scolded her as he glared at her. But Susan didn't seem to care at all.
What? I'm complimenting her. I'm just saying what I see.
She claimed she was complimenting me, but there was no way her words weren't malicious. Paul made a bitter face and fell silent. Kevin, on the other hand, was furious.
That's not a compliment. You're just picking on her.
Susan snorted and hurled even more hurtful words.
And Emma comes from a single-parent household, doesn't she? That's fine for a fling, but a girl raised by just one parent, she's not fit to marry Kevin.
That's how the entire first visit went, one rude comment after another. I was completely drained by the end of it. And even on the way home, there was more drama. When Kevin offered to drive me home, Susan threw a fit.
Why should Kevin have to drive you home when he's already back at our house? Emma, you should tell him you don't need a ride. Go home by yourself.
She yelled.
Mom, I said I wanted to take Emma home, so I'm going to do it. Why are you blaming her? Are you out of your mind?
Kevin was angry and fighting back. He's usually such a calm person. I had never seen Kevin so angry for an entire day, and I started to fully understand what he meant when he said, "She's crazy." No wonder he didn't want me to meet her. If that's how things went on our first meeting, the future doesn't look promising. I started to feel anxious. I loved Kevin, but I couldn't imagine getting along with Susan at all.
I'm really sorry. I'm embarrassed by how horrible my mom's been acting.
On the way home, a dejected Kevin apologized to me. "It's okay, but your mom sure has some unique perspective," I said, trying to be as diplomatic as possible. Kevin let out a big sigh, maybe remembering when the topic of the wedding came up.
She was totally against it, but then she had the nerve to say it should be a huge, extravagant wedding.
Earlier, at Kevin's house, his dad, Paul, had asked, "So, what are you two planning for the wedding?" Both Kevin and I are in our 30s. Paul seemed to think that this gathering was meant to discuss specific plans for the wedding. I, knowing how embarrassed Kevin was about showing his crazy mother to others, tried to offer a solution. "I'm thinking maybe we don't need a big wedding. How about we at least take family photos together?" I added one more point to drive it home. Besides, these days, big weddings are a bit risky.
Yeah, family-only weddings are becoming more common.
Kevin quickly agreed, and so did Paul.
It's different from my time, but if that's what you want, Emma, I'm fine with it.
It looked like my suggestion would stick, but then, for some reason, Susan fiercely opposed it.
No, absolutely not. Are you trying to ruin our family's reputation? Skipping out on such an important occasion is totally unacceptable. You and Kevin have no sense at all.
She shouted, glaring at me.
Marriage isn't just about you. It's about the family. What you want doesn't matter. The whole point of a wedding is to show the world that you're married. A proper wedding is the only way to legitimize your marriage.
Susan was adamant and wouldn't budge. The wedding preparations started, but due to Susan's pressure about family honor, what was meant to be a small gathering turned into a large event, with invitations going out to not only family but also Kevin's and Paul's bosses, co-workers, business partners, and even distant relatives. Meanwhile, my side of the family wasn't nearly as large. I didn't intend to invite distant relatives, so the guest list between the bride's side and the groom's side ended up very uneven.
Oh my, Emma, your family doesn't have many people, does it? And none of them seem particularly impressive either.
Susan said with a sneer, looking at the guest list. In the end, all she wanted was to put me down. The big day arrived. Most of the invited guests showed up, and with no major issues, the wedding began smoothly and peacefully. Friends of ours performed skits, and our old teachers gave speeches. The reception was lively and cheerful. As I mingled with friends and coworkers who came over to chat, I couldn't help but keep an eye on Susan. She was going from table to table, talking animatedly. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but based on her smug expression and the uncomfortable looks on the faces of the people she was talking to, I had a good guess. She was probably boasting about Kevin and bad-mouthing me. What worried me more was that everyone Susan talked to was drinking with her. Susan, likely thirsty from talking so much, kept finishing her drinks and moving to the next table. Her face was red, and she was unsteady on her feet. Kevin and I watched nervously, though we didn't say anything. When I looked around for Paul, I saw him engrossed in conversation with his bosses and coworkers, completely oblivious to the situation. I was just hoping everything would end smoothly, but the real incident happened at the very end of the wedding. During the part where the bride reads a letter to her parents, I expressed my gratitude to my late father and to my mother, who had raised me. My mom was already teary-eyed, holding my dad's picture close to her chest, listening to my words. "Mom, thank you so much for raising me on your own after Dad passed away. When I was little, I used to feel sad during the parent-child races at the school sports day because my dad wasn't there. On Father's Day, everyone was drawing pictures of their dads, but I couldn't because I didn't remember mine. I even cried once when one of the troublemakers in my class teased me, saying, 'You don't have a dad, do you?' During my teenage years, I went through a phase where I was irritated all the time and rebelled against my mom, refusing to talk to her. Looking back, I wish I had done more to show her my appreciation and cherished our time together more. As I read through my memories, I couldn't hold back my tears, and my makeup was a mess. I even started hiccuping, but somehow, I managed to finish reading the letter. From all over the room, I could hear quiet sobbing as others were moved to tears by my words. One of my tipsy uncles shouted, "You can do it, Emma," offering me his gentle support, and the atmosphere in the room was filled with warmth. But then, there was Susan, already quite drunk, with an expression full of disdain.
And now the bride and groom present special gifts to their mothers.
The MC announced, moving on to the next part of the program. Kevin and I handed our mothers teddy bears that weighed the same as we did when we were born.
First, let's hear a few words from the bride's mother.
The MC said, handing the microphone to my mom.
"Oh, were you this tiny when you were born, Emma? Thank you so much. You've grown into such a wonderful young woman, and I'm so proud,"
my mom said, smiling warmly at me. Then, turning to the guests, she gave a beaming smile.
"Thank you all for watching over Emma and for being here today."
When the MC turned to hand the microphone to Susan, she suddenly snatched it from her. Everyone was shocked by her behavior. Without even a word of thanks for the teddy bear, she said,
Emma's mother's speech was very noble, but let's be clear, it's not like she raised Emmy all by herself. She must have had help from men around her along the way, right? I certainly wouldn't want my son to marry the daughter of such a disgraceful single mother, but don't worry, I'll discipline her properly from now on. I suppose I'll be generous enough to let this slide.
The room fell into a shocked silence.
I'm very forgiving,
Susan added with a smug smile, completely oblivious to the horrified reactions around her. Neither Kevin nor I, not even Paul, could find a way to stop her in time. Kevin was speechless. Paul, who had been happily tipsy just moments ago, turned beet red, opening and closing his mouth in shock. I couldn't stand her talking about my mom that way. I glared at Susan and, in a firm voice, declared, "No, I don't need your generosity. Even without a microphone, my voice carried through the quiet room. So what if I didn't have a dad? Is that really such a terrible thing? Everyone dies someday, whether sooner or later. It's not something we can control. You say I'm from a poor single-parent family, but even rich people with both parents can still do terrible things. My mom and I have lived honestly, with nothing to be ashamed of. We don't need your pity.
See, this is exactly what I mean. Daughters of single mothers have such sharp tongues. It's going to take a lot of work to discipline her properly.
Susan turned to the room, trying to rally support.
What are you talking about? Are you out of your mind?
Paul shouted, furious.
Og, that's disgusting.
One of my friends snapped, and soon the guests started murmuring.
What's wrong with her?
Oh, Emma, she doesn't deserve this.
Aren't you ashamed?
Susan must have realized that the reaction wasn't what she had expected. Her face gradually shifted to one of confusion, as if thinking, wait, what? But even as she was met with icy stares, she didn't back down.
I'm just doing this for the family's honor.
She insisted defiantly.
Don't lie and say it's for the family. Mom, you're just prioritizing your own feelings. Neither Dad nor I have ever cared whether Emma was raised by a single parent.
Kevin sharply pointed out. Paul glared at Susan as well.
Talking about single parents like it's a problem. How is that Emma's responsibility? It's not her fault. There are people from normal two-parent households like you who turn out far worse.
Susan, momentarily intimidated by their fury, tried to defend herself.
But children from single-parent homes don't turn out well, do they? I couldn't bear the thought of my precious Kevin suffering.
Paul had finally had enough.
I'm done. We're getting a divorce. Don't you feel ashamed of how drunk and utterly disrespectful you've been? Don't you realize how embarrassing you're acting? The president of my company, our business partners, and Kevin's bosses are all here. Are you trying to ruin our careers?
Susan was clearly not expecting Paul to bring up divorce.
I'm sorry.
She immediately cried out, pleading deeply.
I'll get along with Emma and her mother from now on. Please, don't divorce me. Emma, please say something.
I don't think so. You've insulted not only me but my mom as well. Why would I suddenly be on your side after that pathetic apology? I replied coldly. Kevin stared at his mother, his expression equally icy.
Exactly. You think you can just undo all the damage you've caused. You can't ring a bell, Mom.
At that moment, my mother, who had been quietly watching everything unfold, sighed. She placed my father's photo on the table and gently stroked it.
My husband wanted to live, you know. He wouldn't have wanted anyone to call Emma a child from a single-parent family. Of course, he would have wanted to be here for our beautiful daughter's wedding, don't you think? I'm sure he wanted to walk her down the aisle, but he couldn't. Having a complete family isn't something to take for granted. It's a true blessing. Susan, you've destroyed that happiness yourself.
She said, her face filled with mixed emotions. I wrapped my arm around my mother's shoulders, and Kevin stood on the other side. Then Kevin turned to the room and declared,
I think it's pretty clear to everyone who deserves more respect as a person, my mom or Emma's. The family I want to protect is Emma and her mother, who raised her so well. They're my family now.
Kevin looked directly at Susan.
Mom, thank you for raising me. But please, Don't disappoint me any further.
Susan seemed stunned by Kevin's words and froze. Then, the room erupted into applause and supportive cheers.
Don't let that toxic mother get you down. Stay strong.
From the reactions around her, Susan finally seemed to realize the gravity of what she had done. Susan, no decent person would ever ruin their own son's wedding. When I quietly said that, Susan could no longer keep her head up and broke down, crying loudly. After that, the wedding became somewhat legendary, and word spread among the guests. It even became a topic at my office, and I felt embarrassed for a while. But most of the talk was about Susan's outrageous behavior, and people sympathized with me. Paul wasted no time in contacting a lawyer and filed for divorce. Citing her constant unreasonable behavior and reckless spending, he significantly reduced the amount of alimony Susan would receive. She was kicked out of their home and is now living a lonely, miserable life in a rundown apartment. It was then that I realized the prestigious family background only applied to Paul. Susan had come from a regular working-class background. She was someone who uses another's power to their advantage. Paul also demanded full compensation for the damages and emotional distress caused by Susan's actions at the wedding. Despite the wedding disaster, Kevin and I are doing great. He stood up for me, and I've fallen even more in love with him. Susan, who had been troubling Kevin, is no longer in the picture. Now, Kevin and I can focus on building a happy family together.